Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Gungahlin Community Council public meeting for the month of September. Great to see you all, and if you're tuning us on the Facebook or online, welcome as well. My name is Henley Samuel, President of Gungahlin Community Council. I would like to acknowledge my team here. We got Shah, we got Peter, we got Ralitza and Darren. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please note, if you're joining us for the first time, this program or this stream will be live on Facebook. So just want to make a call out. And if you want to revisit, please go to our Facebook page. And you can see these videos that's available on our Facebook as well. If you're watching online, if you have a question, please pop into the comment section. One of our team members will able to answer the question or able to ask the speakers if that question relates to them, and then we can provide a response via the stream or maybe later to your comment. Tonight we have very interesting topics. The first thing about the ACT Indicative Land Release Program, so we'll get SLA. We got Andrew and his team. Thanks, Andrew, for coming up. And then the next one, we got about the KC block number 9. So this is where the DA was launched and it was denied, and then now they're working on the new DA, which I think Kip will come and talk more about it. And then last but not least, we're going to get all of our MLAs from Arabi mostly, Michael Pedersen, Andrew Braddock, James Milligan, and Leanne Castley, to talk about the cinema update. So where we are with the cinema. Cinema is the hot topic in Gungahlin at the moment. I think we are the only district left out without any cinemas. We've been, it's been almost more than a decade since we wanted the cinema. So there's so many delays, so many reasons, so many stuff happened. So the MLA is going to tell us what they know, and potentially we are also working on a petition. The petition's supposed to be live, up and running, but we had to take a pause because we want to reflect the petition based on the current exact information, what's available. So we are working, so maybe likely to be coming very shortly up, so you can all able to sign the petition as well. Without further ado, I would like to invite Andrew to come and talk about the ACT Indicative Land Release Program. Thanks, Andrew.
Sure. Stand this side. Still in shot there, am I? Yeah, excellent. Yep, no worries. Right, thank you. So my name's Andrew Griffith, and I'm the Development Director Gungahlin with the Suburban Land Agency. So I'll just kick off with a quick acknowledgement of country. So we wish to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land and waters we're meeting on, and recognise other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people or families with a connection to the land of the ACT. We acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. So as noted there, I'm here to give I'll keep moving through. A quick presentation today. So usually we come to this forum about once a year around this time to give an update on the Indicative Land Release Program. That's the program that government publishes that gives industry, community and stakeholders a view towards what the next 5 years look like across Canberra in terms of land releases. We've also got a quick update on GCC East, even though a more substantive one will come there further down. I know there's a lot of interest in this forum on that one, and the Community Council's done quite a good job of advocating on behalf of the direction that one is heading. We've also got an update on Section 1 of 228 in the town centre, and then quickly touching on the other key releases that are identified in the town centre of Casey, Jacker and Kenny. So always worth starting off with the vision of Suburban Land Agency, which is creating great places where communities thrive. And even though that might sometimes sound like a marketing pitch, I can assure you it is absolutely embedded in everything that we do, and we do try to look backwards in terms of our releases and our approach to things, and make sure that's focusing on that lens that we can always take back and put things across the top of that. So I think in particular the direction of the town centre that we're heading is really, really well aligned with that vision. So building on that, we've got a little bit of a focus on affordable living, safe and healthy population, social inclusion and diversity housing choices, and environmentally sustainable development. This slide here is just a quick snapshot of the now 5-year indicative land release program. It's changed format a little bit from prior years. For those quite familiar with it, it's gone from more of a 4-year program that showed a little bit more detail in the outer years to one where there's a lot more detail in the first year. Across the 5 years, you can see that Gungahlin is still a pretty large dominant factor. Molonglo is starting to take over, and you might find in the next couple of years the Molonglo Valley is taking Gungahlin's mantle as the fastest growing community in Canberra, but you can still see there's a substantial amount being released in the next 5 years in Gungahlin, the sort of the second districts in terms of just sheer dwelling numbers. So focusing a little bit more on Gungahlin, we've got 3 suburbs or 3 areas that have releases programmed for this financial year. So that's Casey, blocks 12 and 13 and section 132. For those a little bit familiar with that, that's the empty land across from the Grip Centre. There's a lot of community interest. I know the Community Council has had some advocacy in terms of the views there. I will do a quick update on that one, but important to point out our update is coming from a different directorate, so I'm simply informing on the direction of where we're up to there, and happy to pass on any other questions there on notice to that area. In terms of Gungahlin Town Centre, there is 300 residential dwellings identified for release this financial year. Important to point out, yet we haven't landed on a release or a block or a area there. We are still going through whether there are any viable releases that will align with the commitment to doing place-led engagement, and the Gungahlin Town Centre East finalising that process. If it becomes that we can't finalise that process and get a block out, our CEO is absolutely willing to consider things like deferring and making recommendations to working groups. So we're just going through that process, and we'll give a more robust update once we've had a bit of a think about whether there is viability to get a block or some blocks out, or even a portion of that. That one will come a little bit further down the track once we've done more thinking in that space. And then Jacker of the 99 dwellings. And even though that seems like a small amount, if you put that across with what we've got out in the last couple of years, we've got quite a few blocks over the counter. And the key release within that Jacker 99 is the local centre, so there will be a lot of interest in that local centre or commercial shops. And I'll talk to that one more on another slide. So just a quick update on the Gungahlin Town Centre East. I don't have a lot of pretty visualisations or things, but we will be back in front of this forum with a more substantive update shortly. So I know the Community Council is quite well aware of the process that's happened here, but I'll do a quick snapshot. There was a pretty robust engagement program over the last 12 months that's led to where we're up to. If you wanted to get a good snapshot of that, the Your Say page has an update on the listening report, the place ambition, and I think the draft feedback on the place and design framework, which will be the next deliverable. In terms of that ambition, it has centred on these 4 pillars there, worth reading them out quite quickly, so our first pillar, which is cares, an urban experience in a natural landscape embedding country into place. So it's got a really strong focus on public domain, sensible use of water through there, reusing elements, really walkable areas, really pedestrian permeable areas. Second pillar in terms of a destination for public life and community connection. Definitely the strong feedback that we got through the community engagement was the lack of entertainment options, the lack of destinations to come and see big employment generators. So there's definitely a strong focus within GTC East about those destination type anchor things that get people into the town centre and get people to stay in the town centre, which leads in well to pillar number 3, which is a vibrant 18-hour neighbourhood with next generation agenda. Again, I know there's been strong advocacy from the Community Council around the perception of the dormitory suburb, people heading in one direction out the other. There's been a strong focus in the work that we're doing there in terms of trying to get that activation across the full 18-hour cycle. And then into that last one there of a showcase of sustainable city-making excellence for public life and community connection. It's a really special site and one that's quite unique, not just in the Canberra landscape, but probably in the national landscape of a vacant block next to a major commercial centre like that, integrated into light rail, integrated into bus. So our team's absolutely been taking the opportunity to have a different look of a new way to do things in Gungahlin. The next steps in terms of this journey will be the place and design framework. There's a few steps internally in terms of aligning with government direction, making sure we've got all the ticks before we come back. But once the place and design framework is ready, there'll be further engagement on that, presentations and whatnot. And I expect we'll be back in front of this forum with a more detailed presentation directly around the town centre. Just quickly on that one, following that too, there is probably a further process in terms of aligning the outcomes of the what we're calling the place and design framework with the precinct code. A few people would be aware that the territory plan's also going through the planning reform process, with the new territory plan imminently about to drop. So there's also an element of aligning with those new processes. And then what we used to call an EDP, which will now be called a subdivision plan, or potentially not so much in the urban space, that'll look to align those place and design framework into the precinct code so that they're all marrying up and allowing the releases to match what we're looking to achieve. So moving on to block 1 of section 228, we did do a presentation sometime last financial year, or before 30th of June, relating to this one. So it has been counted as released under a 2-stage tender process. And as we noted on the first stage, the opportunity for public engagement was not over. The first stage is simply a pre-qualification process where we're looking to whittle down the developers who have the capacity to develop something of this scale and have the demonstrated experience to do that. We're currently going through that process of preparing the engagement collateral to come back to community, industry and other stakeholders around the uses of this block. I think, as I mentioned at the last presentation, there's some good framework around this block in terms of stuff already in the precinct code. Ground and first floor commercial only, active frontages that guarantee a certain type of commercial use, not just a residential use. Other things, but worth moving through there, that there's a good opportunity for predominantly commercial uses, but there will, I'd expect, some residential, so we wouldn't be prohibiting residential, and with the scale of the building, there's definitely a good chance that residential would be part of the developer's approach. Definitely in terms of delivering this site, we're quite aware of the known issues, particularly traffic. For those who can't quite make out from the map where this one is, you're on the corner with KFC and McDonald's and the entrance to the village marketplace, so it is one of the traffic intersections that probably is one of the least well performing in terms of the town centre. We're very mindful that we don't want to agitate that as part of releasing this block, so our traffic focus is really having a look at how we do that, and that'll typically be avoiding Ernest Kavanagh in terms of a connection for this block, but we'll work that through with a more detailed option down there. Again, with this release, we'll also be looking to integrate with the work that we've done on GCC East. Even though it's not in that precinct, we're not wanting to be heading in one direction in GTC East and a different direction in the other parts of the Gungahlin Town Centre. So all of the learnings from that GTC East will be carried across into these type of blocks. Just quickly on Casey, as I noted, this one's not a SLA project just yet, so I am passing on information on behalf of another directorate, which is the Environmental Sustainability Planning Directorate. So they're progressing the planning on this site as we speak. Initial engagement around potential subdivision and land uses was in March 2023, and an announcement about the preferred land uses is anticipated by early 2024, could be a little bit before that. Yep. Moving into Jacker, so that one's actively underway. We've got construction contracts there. We've released the first 400 dwellings last financial year, which was a mix of single residential blocks, townhouses and small-scale multi-unit sites. We do have a few blocks over the counter as we speak, which will be supplemented by the blocks that are to go out this financial year. And probably the key release in terms of Jacker this financial year is that blue square in the centre there, which is the local centre. And you can look at the local centre as effectively shops, and we'll be looking at a range of uses. So it allows, I guess, a range of uses across convenience, retailing, business services and community facilities that are designed to support the local needs of the community. Now, in particular with Jacker, there's a group centre intending to come out in Moncrief, another one in Amaroo and one in Casey. So the local centre in Jacker is, again, designed to be an internal small-scale centre that doesn't compete with the retail hierarchy, but is still wanting to get good quality amenities there for the local residents of Jacker and possibly the adjacent suburbs of Bonner and Taylor. We also have a small section of single res coming out this financial year. We're looking at a couple of other projects that are in there in terms of some potential micro lots and some other ones, but it's only around 90 dwellings here, of which the local centre is most of those dwellings. Just jump through there again. Yep. Yes, so just quickly there, stage 2, which is the part that's not yet shown on here, which is the things north of the picture that we're showing at the moment. There is a EDP-DA application moving through the planning system. We expect that there'll be public notification when that one gets to the stage that that one is triggered, and we'll look to do a more robust presentation specifically through the second stage EDP of Jacka. It's a little bit smaller than the existing one. It's only around 190 dwellings, but that is the last component of Jacka, so I do expect that we'll do a more robust presentation either before or moving into the engagement process for the estate development plan or subdivision plan, depending on the timing. Moving into Kenny, which isn't in this financial year, but it is worth talking about. So SLA, it is now officially a project, having been handed across to the SLA, and we're actively now working towards the release. It is worth noting, typically our release cycle is around 3.5 years from when we take on a project to when the first releases come out. There is quite robust engagement processes, finishing off due diligence, moving through master plans, business cases and estate development plans, First Nation engagement, all those type of bits and pieces. So there'll be quite a few opportunities to be back in front of the Community Council, other stakeholders, industry and whatnot as Kenny delivers up. As noted there, we've done a review of the previous due diligence. There's still a few little bits of pieces in terms of due diligence and even updating due diligence. Sometimes the reports can do with a quick update if the age of them has started to slip a little bit. Presently developing the stakeholder engagement strategy, and that'll be the first key component that people will see go live when we start talking to community across the forward 3 years towards those first couple of releases. Indicative land release, I believe, has the first releases programmed for 25-26. And again, the next step in that process will be a master plan. So that was it in terms of the scheduled presentation for tonight. Certainly happy to take any questions relating to the content or any other elements that the Suburban Land Agency looks after. Yeah, sure. So that one was subject to a 2-stage tender process. We are trying to navigate the impacts of the planning reform project presently. So we are halfway through a second stage, and there are some potentially impactful elements as the transition to the new planning system comes. And we definitely don't want to be releasing a strategic site like that to industry why there might be some uncertainty around that one. So we're just moving through the process. I expect we'll be in a position to make an announcement relating to the direction of that one shortly, like as in within the next 3 months.
Oh, g'day. Look, just a couple of questions. With those land releases occurring, and there seems to be a lot of townhouses or individual dwellings, based on cost of residence and that there's a bit of a propensity for like multi-storey apartment dwelling. Mm-hmm. Is there consideration for that in there as well? Because you can put more people into a patch of land with multi-storey, yep, which is probably cheaper to purchase than land plots, yep, considering the current sort of financial state of affairs with purchasing property and land. Yep. And then to go with that will be, we've got a light rail artery basically, mm-hmm, out of Gungahlin into Civic. So appropriate upgrades for bus type connections, yep, into light rail. Is that all part of, like, that maybe you didn't present it, but all, yep, part of the planning that's, yep, sitting beneath the surface? Yep,
yeah, so it's a great question, and there is, one of the focuses is diversity of product in the right locations. So a estate like Jacka will be predominantly single residential houses with that mix of lower scale townhouses and small multi-units, and then when you get into the town centre, it is predominantly higher res, higher density product. Bus and interconnectivity when we do our estates is a pretty key component of that. So when you do an estate like Jacka or even the GCC, it goes through a engagement process with places like TCCS that look after transport networks, and all of those things are looked at. Even to get right down into the small detail, when you do a greenfield estate, it's expected 90% of dwellings will be within a 5-minute walk to a bus stop, so all of those type of things do get looked at. But it is a good observation. There's a strong focus from government around doing 70% of dwellings within the existing urban footprint, and you are correct, a lot of the time the most efficient or even the lowest cost to the product is to do that in higher residential.
Yeah, well, it's just affordability for people because dwellings. But I just draw attention to with respect to the light rail and the numbers at the beginning of the presentation.
Yep.
So Gungahlin still has big numbers. It's still expanding.
Yes.
We've got a light rail artery. There seems to be a lot of planning and a lot of attention to the light rail down to Woden.
Yep.
But you look at the numbers compared to Molonglo,
Yep.
doesn't make sense.
Sure.
So just throwing that one out.
Yeah, a good observation, and worth pointing out that we work in parallel with the Planning Directorate, so they do a lot of the work around population demographic forecast, where the people are, where the elements are. So definitely SLA plays a key role in part of that, but we do need to work with other parts of government, and it is worth pointing out that the Planning Directorate do deal with the indicative land release program as the lead in terms of the numbers, where they're positioned, and then SLA is the delivery arm in terms of just releasing what's in the indicative land program.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
I take your note that, so this question's in relation to the Casey blocks, and I take your note that it's another directorate that's looking at that. But I thought there was already an announcement made that there's an emergency services element going in there.
Sure.
And so my question is related to, does the 100 dwellings that were in the plan, does that take into consideration the space taken up by that emergency services unit?
Yep.
And as a follow-up question, to what extent does your directorate work with that other directorate to kind of, align purposes and come up with joint solutions?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to the last part first, very closely. So partnership arrangement, it's quite a close. We fall within that directorate in terms. SLA is an independent agency, but we do report up that line. So very close working relationship. There is, because we're not the ones driving that project, there's usually what's called the assurance pack handover process. So when SLA is engaged, there's a package that comes across that kind of gives us the expectations of government, the work that's done. So I can't really comment too much on the Casey one other than saying that government is aware of the community interest. I definitely know that those health and emergency services provisions are being looked at within that precinct. To the question of the 100 dwellings, again, it is the indicative land release program, so that is subject to change based on cabinet or government decisions. And there's processes there that should there not be sufficient space for that 100 dwellings, or if there is, government are in a position where they can amend those numbers based on a few forums.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thanks for you particularly, because I know that you're a bit of the sort of Gungahlin sort of expert when it comes to the Suburban Land Agency, and when it comes to Gungahlin you tend to attend a lot of the meetings, and you tend to be answering a lot of questions specifically, at least from the Gungahlin Community Council's perspective, about the development applications and things that are going on. So for you personally, I'd like to thank you for what you do and the straight answers that you do give. I'm also appreciative of the fact that a lot of what you covered when it came to Gungahlin East was exactly what the Gungahlin Community Council has been trying to articulate for a long time. And a lot of the responses that have come back to date haven't been sort of responsive to that or telling us that you understand what those concerns are. And so I guess your summary when you were talking about the points of employment, the points of, all of those aspects of looking at it as a precinct is something that we like to hear. And I think that, I think it's great to hear. It's all those wonderful things about the dormitory suburb and, those types of aspects. So thank you for that. It's good to know that it's been listened to. I guess the next part of it is, from my perspective, as to how this sort of pairs into the next phase of, we might want to look at it as a precinct, and we might want to have businesses interested in what the community panels and that sort of stuff come up to. So I'm wondering how this sort of pairs in with the sales strategy, if you will, because we did have some mention from the minister's sort of department about sort of talking to federal government departments about the possibility of locating more departments there. And the Community Council was really sort of trying to reach out to the Chief Minister's department to sort of expand that, to look at other businesses and commercial interests to be interested in whatever comes about in the future. So I'd just like to touch on that as to where the Suburban Land Agency sort of stands from a marketing point of view about trying to get people interested in actually buying the lots of land once we sort of look into that.
Sure. Yes, as you'd be aware, that there was sort of government inquiry and petitions and a lot of activity at the executive branch or the cabinet branch in terms of this one. So we're absolutely delivering on all of those commitments from commercial needs studies and other bits and pieces there. There was a prospectus done, I believe, that's also being looked at and will continue to be looked at. Now that's the one that's really targeting into those Commonwealth anchors, because that is sort of one of those funding bodies that's very hard to replicate elsewhere. If you can get a Commonwealth building in, that is again always going to be a challenge. Just being directly honest there, that you've got the city and the airport that maybe do have very established business areas that make it difficult to attract those to Gungahlin. But we'll absolutely be working with directorates across industry, anyone who's interested in investing in the town centre, and our team is continuing to do work around the opportunities there. So as the place and design framework gets expanded, it's really looking down to the fine grain around building sizes, tenancy sizes, investment opportunities, so that when someone does approach government, we can quite easily say, we can find you a space, or these are the ones that work for you, or just be honest with them and say, no, you're not the right fit for the town centre. So there is a lot of work moving into that space of trying to find the right people there. We're also doing quite a lot of work in terms of the commercial needs assessment, because while it might not always be the nicest thing to hear, some things just aren't viable in the town centre, or some uses won't be the type that we feel we're going to attract without government massively subsidising. So there's a lot of work on that one, and we expect that there'll be more engagement back with EPSTD and the Community Council around the nature of the commercial and employment opportunities that we feel can work in the town centre, what we think might be inappropriate, and what can balance across the existing commercial in that space. But I think that's one of the real strong conversations that still needs to be had in terms of the disbursement of commercial opportunities within the town centre.
The second question I wanted to just quickly ask was in regards to, thank you for at least drawing the attention to the block of land that's across from McDonald's there. I like to just refer to that rather than block numbers, because it makes more sense to people that are out there about where these blocks are. And I've seen a few people ask about, what the future is of, open air car parks, and I often sort of say to them that, that will be slated for sale. And is the government sort of looking at communication when it comes to the general community of Gungahlin, so it doesn't come as quite a shock to people when, often a lot of the times when the land's sold, you often have fences sort of go up fairly quickly, and a lot of people are a bit shocked because they're used to sort of parking in that area type scenario.
I'll just clarify, I wasn't being rude there. I was looking at my phone specifically because I missed a very important point on block 1 of 228, which was that the car park is going to be closed for one day on the 25th of September to allow for some testing. So I would have got shot if I didn't do that one. So excellent, your question has prompted that one. Definitely take your point on notice. We try to give as much notice as we can on those. And I think one of the good elements of the place and design framework for that precinct scale of GCC East is we're considering things along the lines of staging, and that's across the area. So there may be more opportunities to both influence the indicative land release program, where we kind of know the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year horizon, but also more opportunity to show community this is kind of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So you're right there, if there's strategic sites such as sites that are being used as car parks now that make their way onto releases, there's good opportunities for community to adjust around, understand the timing. Apologies, Nat.
Did you want that? Yeah, you did.
I'm Natalie with Andrew. Just to say there is communication happening, if it hasn't already been, coming to people around that site in this week, might even been late last week, in relation to the car park being closed on that day. And there'll be signage and things like that up as well. But yes, certainly going forward, it's our expectation to be communicating, and we'll also be providing a copy of that letter to you as well, Henley, so that you can share it through your socials.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Any other questions on the floor? Do we have any questions on the Facebook?
I'll ask another one.
Sure.
Sorry, through the development that I'm involved in, we're aware that there's quite a bit of congestion on the arterial roads at the sort of western end of Horse Park Drive, Gungahlin Drive, Clary Hermes Drive area. And obviously the ongoing land releases by the Suburban Land Agency is going to be contributing to that around that area.
Right.
So is the Suburban Land Agency working with Roads ACT on a pathway to increase the capacity of those roads?
So short answer is that in the estate development process, those traffic assessments do get fit into it. So that is an area that the TCCS are leading, and they are doing studies in those spaces as we speak. In terms of that North Gungahlin, Jack already had its intersection, or its Horse Park intersection designed as part of the previous works. And Jack is a relatively niche one, so we're not expecting that's going to substantially agitate it, but definitely the point's noted. I drive that road myself on the way into Dixon or City when I'm coming in, so if you do get the peak hours, you can absolutely see the traffic. We're also going to be mindful of that when we hit Kenny, so we are really having a strong think about the intersections for Kenny and trying to not agitate any elements in there. So definitely point noted, and we can pass that one on to TCCS should you wish to get a more robust update.
With just following up on that question, Andrew, thank you and Nicole and team for coming down today.
Sure.
It's always good to have you guys, and I think you're the most engaged department at this stage within the ACT government, I can say that. So,
Appreciate the compliment.
with the Ospark Drive, the duplication, we did raise with TCCS, whatever it stands for, but I think they're thinking they don't have any vision for this to be upgraded at near time soon. So I'm not sure, because as a SLA, you are in charge of building those new suburbs coming, but also I'm not sure whether you can influence, or based on the evidence, are you guys able to make some recommendation to that team so that they can consider it? Because the Taylor is rapidly growing, and with Jacka going to be coming soon, we don't want to we play a catch-up game, so we don't want this to be routine for Gungahlin, but we just want to, from the lessons learned, we want to come up with an outcome that's going to be helpful for everyone. So.
Sure. I think the best approach for that one is for us to take the question on notice, and we'll connect with the appropriate team within TCCS towards the desire of the Community Council to have an answer on what the thinking is for Horse Park or surrounding, and we can maybe get them to respond.
Okay, that'd be great. So one more question regarding the Casey, the chart that you were showing where you have 100 residential.
Sure.
So do you know where that block going to be?
I do, yep. So if you
do you have it on the map or by any chance?
Yep. Sure. So that's, if you're familiar with the grip centre, that's the existing grip centre across the road, so effectively adjacent to the big open space car park.
So that's where the 100 residential...
Oh, well, that's the two blocks in terms of the land release that have that indicative target of 100 attached to them. As I said before, EPSTD and government are still going through the process of what the land use and land mix will look like on that site. So I'd expect that there'll be an announcement on that one by early 2024.
Is it going to be individual blocks, or is it commercial blocks that we like a tower or apartment style?
Unfortunately, probably not in a position to talk to that one. So that's another one that, if you wanted a more substantive update, I can connect you with the appropriate part of the Planning Directorate.
So in regards to that block that we're talking about near McDonald's and what you were saying about, not entering more traffic in there, we have had some sort of precursory sort of conversations with TCCS in regards to traffic studies. Yep. And when you talk about traffic studies, one of the things that we really, I think, I guess I can't speak on behalf of the Gungahlin Community Council, but me personally, I find that often a lot of the times the blocks of land are being released here, and we're sort of being assured that traffic modelling is underway, and that it's at various stages, I think was the explanation of that there is traffic modelling that's available that is sort of computerised that they use in order to sort of anticipate certain things. But I guess from the Community Council's point of view, we would like to be more involved in how that traffic modelling is being applied. And when we're at this stage about blocks of land being applied, when you know that there's, congestion in this particular area, it would be nice from our perspective to sort of understand how this traffic modelling is actually done, because it is quite complex.
Yep.
And in the conversations that we've had some level of difficulty being able to have that explained to us.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see how the Suburban Land Agency and the other various departments, TCCS and ESPDD, sort of work in with this traffic modelling so that we can have a better understanding as to how it's applied before the blocks of land are released. Do you think that that could be something that we could look into in the future?
I think so. I think, again, that's probably most appropriate for us to take on notice and look to connect to the appropriate parts of government towards a desire to do a presentation or a written feedback on traffic modelling. As you said, it is quite complex because there's a couple of layers from your city level to your estate level to your micro DAs, and they're all a little bit different in terms of how they're done. But we'll take that one away and we'll see if we can connect with a part of government that can give a more detailed answer.
Thanks, Andrew. Probably last question for tonight for you.
Okay, I'll make it a question. So, is it possible for the government to take away those individual technical assessments that developers contract and pay for to get a certain answer, take that away and have a truly independent assessment to get a truthful result? Is that possible?
It's probably not one I can comment on, so the planning
Okay,
director
that's
deal
fine.
with the DA.
Question on notice, back to the responsible minister. Right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming down. So the next item on the agenda, I'll get the much awaiting news for tonight. The KC block number 9, section 132, DA reconstruction. So Kip, would like to invite you to come and do the presentation for tonight.
All right. Oh, that's the forwards and back. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming along tonight. So I'm here to present an update on the KC Block 9 development proposal. This is the image that you'll be familiar with. This is the updated image, which is showing the building with 2 stories less than what it had in the original development application. I'm going to apologise for the black and white nature of my presentation, because this week's it's an interesting week to be a consultant planner with the new territory plan being released on Monday. So I've got my head's floating in a few things at the moment. So I'm going to start with just a brief introduction to the reconsideration process, just to make sure everybody understands where we're at with that. The DA was lodged. And obviously there was a public consultation period around the DA. There were a lot of submissions received. The Planning Authority had a lot of questions around the DA, and so they normally, with the DA like that, they would ask the developer for further information to sort of explain why we're proposing what we're proposing. But in this case, they didn't do that step. They went straight to a notice of decision and a refusal of the proposal. And the notice of decision contains the list of reasons why they refused the proposal, and I will talk through some of those in my presentation. And so then, when issuing that notice of decision, that gets sent out to everybody who made a representation on the DA. So everybody should have seen that when it came out if you made a representation. And so then when a notice of decision comes out like that, the proponent normally has a 20-day window to apply for a reconsideration or to try and take the government to ACAT if they really want to fight the decision. But that 20-day limit is allowed. You're allowed to say, well, actually, it's going to take us longer than 20 days to think about this. Can we have more time, please? And so they gave us more time to think about what we're going to put back in for reconsideration. And then once we lodge our reconsideration, the Planning Authority normally has 20 days to make a new decision, but they can ask us for an extension of time on that. And so the exact time frame for a reconsidered decision it should be 20 days, but it might be a little bit longer depending on how much feedback they get from the community. And so then with reconsiderations can be substantial or can be relatively minor. This one's obviously there's a lot of interest in the project, and so the Planning Authority have chosen to publicly notify the reconsideration, and I believe they will have notified everybody individually that made representations, but also the documentation is available on the EPS.DD website where all of the DA notifications sit. And that's open for comment now, and you've got until the 29th of September to make submissions on that. And so then, yeah, I've already said the notice of decision has a big long list of all of the issues that they had with the development proposal. So taking a step back, I realise I'm going to have to talk quickly actually. Canberra has a growing population, we're changing our family structures to smaller households, we've got a shortage of housing. We need to sort of make a choice between growing outwards or growing inwards and upwards. From a sort of strategic planning point of view, the government is seeking to make us grow inwards and upwards more than outwards. Increasing our density certainly uses our existing resources more efficiently, but apartment dwelling is not for everybody, so not everyone's going to love apartment projects, but it is actually very important for some people. It's the right type of housing for certain people at certain stages in their lives. And at Casey, we think that an apartment project is actually filling a gap because there's townhouses and there's single dwelling houses at Casey, but there's very few apartments. And so it does increase the choice of housing typology in the Casey area. This is the alternate view. It's about the only other bit of colour in the presentation. And so this is what's being proposed for reconsideration is very, very similar to the original DA, but with 2 stories chopped out of it. So the whole building has come down by 2 stories. And so why Casey? It's a large group centre. It's ultimately it's a group centre designed to have 3 full-line supermarkets there. So it's of the group centre scale thing. It is a larger group centre. Strategically, it's identified for urban intensification. The zoning permits higher density based on merit in that location, and the site that we've got there it's an ideal location because it is right on top of the shopping centre. It's close to entertainment, it's close to the coming community facilities, there's some employment opportunities right on the doorstep. There's great active travel connectivity to that location. There is public transport. I know the community, one of the key things the community raised is the public transport's pretty ordinary, but it's there and it's only going to get better. And the particular site that we've got is it's actually quite separated from other existing residential development, and so the kind of issues like overshadowing and overlooking that normally apply to sort of taller apartment developments really don't exist for this development. So then I've had a quick review of the district strategy and what that says about Casey. It largely reflects the previous planning policies. It identifies Casey as a category 1 change area. So that's kind of just managing your expectations that the Casey Group Centre is not finished yet, and there's a lot to come in that group centre. So it's not. I think So there's more to come there, and it's and some of the key things that they're talking about in the district strategy for Gungahlin and Casey is reducing car dependence and more active travel and enhancing public transport connections between around the group centres that they've got at Casey, Moncrief and Amaroo. So they're certainly flagging that the public transport should get better over time as well. So the changes that we've made to the proposal for the reconsideration process is cut 2 stories out. So that cuts 49 dwellings out of it. So it's gone from 219 down to 170 dwellings on the site. But the basement hasn't been changed. And so that actually results where previously we were relying on more off-site car parking, particularly for the commercial uses. there's now a relatively generous supply of car parking provided on site. And then there's a few other minor tweaks that have been made to address some of the agency comments. TCCS always make lots of comments around the size of the bin enclosures and the spaces needed between the bins and those sorts of things. So there's been a little bit of changes, but the basement is essentially the same. The ground floor commercial areas are essentially the same as what was there previously. The sort of internal courtyard area is more or less the same, with the sort of 3 levels of communal open space sort of tiered up the middle. And then on the top, there's a series of 2-storey sort of townhouse type apartments that sit on top of the apartment building to give us a greater range of dwelling typologies. And the other thing that I haven't put on here is the other thing that we had to really clarify was the 2-storey units that are on the ground floor fronting the pond side of the development. We needed to be more clear that the ground floor of those units cannot be used for residential purposes. It's a mandatory rule in the zone that we're in. You can't have residential uses at ground floor, and so those apartments will be a 2-storey unit where you can live in the upper floor and have a commercial space on the lower floor. And so the expectation would be that would be for like a consultancy or an office space or like some sort of public agency type service. It's not going to work as a retail space, I don't think, facing the pond there, but certainly a destinational type commercial space would work quite nicely in those spaces. In this day and age, when we all use Google to tell us where our destination is, I don't think you don't sort of need a street front anymore for those types of things. So I'm not sure if everybody's read the notice of decision, but I've got some slides here that kind of sort of step through the key things that they raised in the notice of decision. There were issues with the original DA, so they basically deemed it to not meet certain criteria, but they were sort of merit-based criteria, so it's a subjective decision. But the critical matter, so we had a meeting with the Planning Authority after they issued the notice of decision, and really the critical matter was the height and the sort of overall scale of the development. They used the word overdevelopment in the notice of decision, I think. So, and so reducing the height was the key thing, and that flows through to a reduced overall development on the site. And obviously the scale of the development was picked up in a lot of the community comments. And so, yeah, reducing the height reduces the relative traffic impacts and the parking issues and visual impacts, etc. So there were specific matters that they raised in the notice of decision. There was some commentary about landscaping, and so we've clarified how the multi-layered sort of internal communal space will work, how the off-site landscaping is being proposed. The traffic, we've clarified. TCCS made some specific comments about the traffic report. So there's an updated traffic report in the updated submission. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I mean, effectively, there's, as I said before, there's traffic issues on the arterial roads around Casey, and we know that. And without action, that's going to get worse because there's a lot more development happening that's feeding those roads. And in effect, the development that we're putting forwards is like it's a bit like a drop in the ocean to that arterial road network. So that's kind of there's bigger picture issues that don't necessarily come back to this, the responsibility of this DA to solve. The EPA raised issues about noise because what they needed to clarify was that particular certain potentially noisy issues that are permissible in the zone wouldn't be permissible in this building. And so we just had to clarify the mechanism by which those uses will be ruled out from this building. I talked about clarifying the use of the ground floor, reducing the number of stories. And the key thing with the number of stories was that the National Capital Design Review Panel took a position on what would be, like they supported a higher density development on the site, taking into consideration the location and the nature of the site, etc. And they suggested a range of heights, with the upper number that they put forward was 8 stories. And so, it was 8 stories on the sort of car park side of the site, facing the car park. And so we've now reduced what was proposed to be within the bounds of what they were talking about. And the plot ratio, obviously, that comes down as well by reducing the scale of the building. There was conversation in the notice of decision about setbacks, which we've clarified our position on that. There's conversation about the communal open space, which I think came down to the planning authority not fully understanding how the internal open spaces were working for the people. There was questions about provision for delivery vans and stuff. And again, I think it was just a need for some more clarification about how some of those service spaces were working. And there was the issue around car parking. In our original DA, we were suggesting that this development would rely on, I think it was 68 off-site car parking spaces. And we had done some car park counts in the Casey Group Centre that identified that even at the busiest times, there was up to 160 vacant car parking spaces in the car park next to the group centre. And so we had thought that it was reasonable to rely on using about half of those vacant spaces to support this building. And so, but we've pulled that back now because we've kept the same number of on-site car parking that we're providing. And so technically, what's being proposed, the number of car spaces meets the number of car spaces that would be required for this building. But I don't think we would pretend that if you're coming to visit this building and there are vacant spaces in the car park next door, that you wouldn't just park there along the front of the building and instead of driving down into the basement. So there's going to be, I mean, people will use the surface car park there, but it's not being relied on for this DA specifically. We got the notice of decision lists community issues that were raised, and I've put a little note here. They sort of said they've provided a list of the main issues raised by the community, and I don't necessarily agree that their list was actually the list of the most important things. And so I think that the list of most important things is actually better captured in our community engagement report that we provided with the DA based on the community engagement we did before we lodged the DA. But I have read the submissions that came in on the DA, and clearly concerns about traffic, and it's concerns about regional traffic as much as anything, is the biggest concern for the community. The parking, which is the perceived lack of available car parking around Casey. And there's the character issue that is being raised by people in the community, where people are worried that this building is going to change the character of Casey. And people are saying that they think that this building is too tall for a suburban centre. And people are worried about the visual impact, effectively changing the view, changing the what you can see. And people are saying desire for more frequent public transport. I've put lots of stuff in the report about providing for bicycles. And we got lots of feedback from people saying that it's nonsense, nobody in Casey rides a bike. And I checked the census data, and it's true. On census night, nobody from Casey rode their bike to work that day. So what I'm hoping is that maybe some people from Casey might start riding a bike if we provide the right facilities in this location. And last time I came to present to this forum, I drove to the site, to Casey, and rode my bike from the site to here, and timed myself and demonstrated that you can do it without, like, you can get all the way to the swimming pool block in the town centre. I don't know if I'm pointing in the right direction. That way, to where the swimming pool is, between there and Casey, without crossing a single road, right? You can go underpasses the whole way. So if you're scared of traffic, like you can get into the town centre here without riding on a single road. So, just think about it, all right? Peter knows I'm part of pedal power cycling advocacy as well. So, and then there were some issues raised about the process just around the time for consultation and the time that was provided for people to provide feedback, etc. And so there's a reconsideration report that's available online, and I've tried to articulate our responses to these issues in that report. But obviously, I'm trying to skip through the presentation and give you the opportunity to ask me directly as well at the end of this. But I also there were submissions that supported this development, and so there were people who were writing in interested in buying or renting in the space. There were people with commercial interests interested in renting space in the building. There were people in the existing shopping centre saying more people, good for business. There are people as a general level saying yes, more density, less urban sprawl. There were people at a general level supporting just the delivery of more housing to meet the apparent demand, support for general activation of the area. Saying it's better than the dirt that's there with the busted shopping trolleys, etc. But then there are also quite a few other sort of questions around the provision of community facilities in Casey and ones that were sort of not directly related to our DA. And then just in terms of the agency feedback that gets raised in the notice of decision, I talked about TCCS. They ask questions about some of the off-site works because there's existing publicly owned street lights and things like that in the area, waste and storage and removal requirements. And then their questions about the traffic modelling were more about the detailed methodology of the modelling as opposed to rejecting the results of the modelling. They were sort of asking why, or can we some of the roundabouts there operate as sort of paired systems because the tailbacks from one roundabout hit the next one sort of thing, and so we needed to update some of the modelling to reflect to sort of reflect those TCCS comments. The EPA, I said already, and Icon Water just needed some clarification around how the water network is going to cope with this building and some of the design details. And so then putting the sort of the proponent's summary forward, it's just noting that the Casey Group Centre is intended to be a node of high density urban development. There's a lot more to come in Casey. This particular site is well suited to a high density development. It's away from existing residential development, so it's not going to overshadow people. The proposal's been reduced by 2 stories, so that's 49 fewer apartments. The design review panel, they supported up to 8 stories on the side that's facing the car park, so that's in the order of magnitude that we're now proposing. And the traffic congestion issue is it's an issue that's facing us, it's facing the residents of Casey, it's going to be facing the EDP that the EPSDD put in for the community facility sites. It's actually a big picture issue for North Gungahlin, and so I think we talked about this at the last time I was here. The traffic analysis that we've done for this project, there's some pretty good data in there that shows how some of the roads through Casey are being used as rat running routes for people escaping Horse Park Drive. It shows how the Clary Hermes Drive roundabouts are pretty much at capacity already. There's some really good information in there that kind of we all should be using to advocate for a resolution of those existing issues. The public notification. If you want to make comments, you've got till the 29th of September, and you do that through the normal EPSDD website that you make comments on any DA on. And now, hopefully, I've left time for questions.
You can have that mic check. All right. Thanks for coming and doing the presentation. I'm going to open the forum pretty much, and we've already got a couple of questions on Facebook as well. You made some interesting comments on the bikes. Probably if you would have proposed that idea prior to light rail, we would have saved millions of dollars. Well, I'm going to go to the questions now.
Thank you. The first question I had was, you talked about the feedback you received and the letters, both positive and negative.
Yep.
From memory, there was around 70 submissions. Can you give us an idea of how many of those were positive, how many were negative?
Yeah, so I'll preface this with that we shouldn't make planning decisions based on just a number of votes, because that's, well, you could write a thesis as to why that doesn't work, but it was about 2/3 negative, 1/3 positive in terms of the numbers that we received. It was actually about 160 submissions came in on the development application. So it was about 2/3, 1/3. So and about 1/3 were positive ones.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. And my second question was, I think in general we understand the need for densification and options for affordable living, etc. Still a 9-storey development. That's equivalent, for example, to the James Court apartments in the centre of the CBD, the whole way down Northbourne. There's much more public amenity in those areas. It's still, from my perspective, an oversized development for the location. And it feels like by suggesting that it's appropriate for that location, you're more or less equating the utility and amenity and the merit with the CBD. Now, how can you make that equivalence?
Yeah, I'd say I know that it's much bigger than what's out there now. I'm not pretending it's not, but it's also there is definitely more to come in Casey. With the release of the community facilities land, that's going to bring I would quite a bit of extra activity, amenity, those sorts of things there. There's in the medium to long term, there's a whole other supermarket sort of site to be developed in Casey, and so there's quite a lot of employment opportunities still to come, but also, sorry, I'm thinking about too many things at once. There's also I think an evolution of the expectation of what we want to achieve across Canberra at local centres and group centres and town centres anyway. And so there's examples of newer local centres and group centres which have developments approaching this scale. I've raised in the development application report that there's examples out in Molonglo where they're building the bigger Molonglo group centre there, where they're going to provide opportunities for up to 15 stories, and even just the local centre, the Whitlam local centre, I think is going to 6 or 7 stories. So our expectations and our aspirations and what we need to do to achieve the sort of inward and upward density in Canberra, comparing it to older group centres might not be what we should be thinking about for the future. And also, I think that there's been flagged the sort of equivalent of a frequent rapid bus that just does the loop around from the town centre to Amaroo, Moncrief, Casey, that would be providing a very good public transport link to service people. So the level of amenity out there is actually, it's pretty high. I think it's pretty good now, but it's going to get better into the future. And so I think we need to be thinking about this building and what's going to be around it in 10, 20 years' time, not necessarily what's around it today.
Next. Yeah, look, I do have a question, but I'd just like to offer a bit of support for the development reference the last question. So you don't have to go to Molonglo, you don't have to go to Northbourne Avenue of the city. You can go into your town centre in Gungahlin, which isn't really a town centre. It's right opposite residential properties. And you've got 22-storey, you've got 20-storey, you've got 18-storey. So maybe the rest of the Gungahlin community just needs to grip it up. And 7 and 8, maybe 9-storey is a bit at the top end. But that's a pretty average height. I mean, you look at a lot of European centres and 7, 8-storey apartment buildings that have been around for maybe a century. It's pretty common. So I'll jump on to my question. With this particular development, what is the mix? 1, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, maybe 4 bedroom? Because that's the alternative to buying a house on a block of land. If you've got a family, a growing family, is an apartment that has enough room for your family, not just a bunch of students or maybe a singly or a couple.
Yeah. I'm going to have to take that on notice because I can't tell you exactly the numbers, but there's some 3-beddies. It's substantially 2 bedrooms and some 1-bedroom ones. But there is a mix of typologies in that, but it's the biggest number is the 2-bedroom apartments.
Righto. Yeah, because I guess, as I said, 3 bedroom, maybe even bigger, is where families will move in.
Yeah.
And from personal experience, as the DA is approved, and then over time DA changes are put in, my experience in apartments nearby has been that reduces down to 2 and 1 bedroom because you can get more dollar per square metre for that, which is no incentive for families moving into apartment accommodation.
Yeah, so interesting. I agree that often happens, but I have been involved in a different multi-unit development project that we did do amendments to actually consolidate some of the apartments because a lot of the sales inquiries were coming from families. And so we did actually convert some of the dwellings into 3-beddie ones by consolidating them. So that's probably the rarity, but it can go both ways. But yeah.
But I mean, that helps address your affordability problem. I know peaks and troughs over time, but it's very topical and very critical at the moment.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm just having a look at, I live in Amaroo, so this constant talk about comparing the group centres in Amaroo, for example, is very close to Casey. Amaroo's probably at most 3 stories. There's a photo of it right there.
I think it's 3. I think there's a little bit of 4, but it's much. Yeah,
it's a lot smaller. Yeah. And I guess one of the things about there also is that needs to be mentioned here, considering I'm a local there, is the massive amount of car parking that's between both centres on either side. So there's ample amount of parking there that's in those places. I think it's good that you've reduced the sizes because I think that was obviously an issue, and it's good that the traffic modelling has been looked at. I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're sort of mentioning that there are problems with Claire Hermes Drive and the rat racing that sort of comes through there. I mean, a lot of the residents there, when I used to travel through there, couldn't get onto the main Claire Hermes. I don't know how. They probably need to really look at that, and I think that that's something that I think the Community Council has been very well aware of and has talked to the government about. So we are aware of it and we are pushing that. And that's not your fault. That obviously there's a new school that's being built in that area. There's aged care facilities that are being built in that area. There's rat racing that's going through there that's contributing to the problem. And that's not necessarily this development's fault or responsibility, but you're sort of caught with that. But one thing that I will say that I was at the DA sort of presentation initially, and given the success of the retail in Casey, one of the things that I guess I was surprised with was the presentation of the original development spoke at length about the residential. and there was very little, if anything, mentioned about the commercial. And I guess from my perspective personally, this lack of, I mean, even in this presentation, there was very little that was spoken about the commercial. And, you know, you talk at length about the 3-beddies and the 2-beddies and and all that sort of stuff. And I guess what I'm sort of saying is, given the success of the commercial, why isn't this more commercially focused development? And I guess I would say that the reason why it's not unusual, because in Gungahlin, and I talk about this with Gungahlin East as well, in a lot of these, that there is residential in the Gungahlin town centre, but there's 2 floors of commercial, which I think makes a big difference in regards to the sort of perception of residential versus commercial. And one of the, I guess I just asked the question, why is commercial not more of a sort of a focus of this development?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's people don't tend to ask us about it much either, and so but so I mean, it's the whole front the front space of the building towards the car park is commercial space that will provide for opportunities for shops or restaurants or whatever to front into the car park to sort of mirror the frontage of the existing shopping centre, and then the back side, or the side that's facing the pond, will have these sort of commercial spaces there as well, which will be more usable for a more like like an office or a personal services type commercial space. And there have been people writing in saying, you know, when's this coming to the market? I'd like to move my business into those spaces. There've been inquiries like that on the project, but it's it just no one's sort of really questioned why aren't we doing multiple stories of commercial? And so I'd have to go back to the proponents and ask them. I'm assuming that it's an economic decision on their part, but yeah, I mean they also do own the marketplace as well and the car park block in between, so they would have a very big picture understanding of the sort of supply and demand for commercial space in Casey, and they've chosen to do just the ground floor as a commercial space with residential above. So.
The second part is I feel continually underwhelmed, I should say, about the area that's facing the pond there, about the landscaping and things like that go in. And one of the things that I've looked at in some of the developments in the town centre here is this sort of, you know, lack of anything around the actual development itself, or it sort of pairs into the natural landscape. It's sort of like a dumping ground. It's full of rubbish. There's not much really done there in order to sort of make that a nice area for people that live in the area. And when I saw that sort of frontage that's facing onto the ponds there's mention about, as you say, about the landscaping and things like that. I don't really see that sort of reflected in that at all. Any real thought about the landscaping and how that blends into the pond.
I should have put a landscaping picture in my presentation. The updated proposal, we have modified the proposed landscaping between the building and the pond to consolidate some of the pathway links that link to those ground floor developments. There's also, the building does, because of the changing level of the site, the building has an entry, like a door, from the pond path level that gets you into the sort of basement level, where we're providing some cycling end of trip type facilities there, so you'll be able to get at grade into those areas, and that will sort of help to, hopefully, if some people start riding their bikes, activate that space a little bit. So and our proposal includes a little bit of additional landscaping that spills into that side of the pond there, with some additional trees and a bit of park bench and that sort of stuff. But the pond itself is a TCCS asset, so it's you've got to be a little bit. We can't propose to do anything there which TCCS won't be willing to maintain either. and so it's got to be the nicest you can propose, but it's limited to a relatively simplistic TCCS maintainable outcome as well.
And just the last quick question. One of the things that I always say about developments sort of like this that are sort of medium dense, you said heavy density I think before, but obviously it's sort of...
It's more relative.
Yeah, it was, and so I guess one of the things that I want to know about here is that are you considering any community sort of facilities within there for the residents that actually live there? You know, sort of, as I often sort of say, well, you know, there's this focus on apartments and things like that, but if you've got families and things that are living in there, are there aspects to this development that concentrate on community facilities within the development itself that talk about, you know, barbecue areas or things like that that are communal use or things like that sort of, you know, go away from the concrete jungle type thing and actually are focused on the residents and how they can sort of communally sort of use those spaces and green spaces themselves, how they sort of work in? I haven't seen much of that.
So on the ground floor, which is level with the car park, is this entry that takes you into the sort of central courtyard area, and sort of to the right is where the services spaces are, because the rubbish trucks have to have somewhere to pick up the rubbish and all that sort of stuff. And to the left is a green space sort of in the triangle in the middle of the building. But then you can just see it, there's a staircase that goes from that level up to the next level up, and at that level there's another there's a green space and also an indoor space, which will be communal space, which would be like used to be determined, but either split into like a gym, sort of shared open space, or possibly like a co-working space, because that's becoming increasingly popular in apartment developments like this. And then on the next level, then there's stairs up again to another level. On top of that space, there's another space with green space and trees and stuff on that as well. So there's kind of this tiered arrangement for communal space, and by being one level up from this level here, it'll kind of give it a more sort of for the residents feel than something that's just at ground level that sort of everyone can get to. So,
thank you.
And like all the plans are online. We've written to the planning authority and they're tidying up the notification page. I don't know if it's been tidied up yet, but when it went live, there was about 4 copies of just about every document. It was a real mess. But the plans are online. But I can go through some of the plans with you afterwards if you want. Yeah.
Hey, Kip.
How you going?
I just want to have a bit of a chat about how do we decide what is the appropriate height for this development in Casey. And by we I mean the community, the developer and EPSDD, because we're all involved in this. And I take the gentleman's point over there that Casey just needs to suck it up, but I actually don't think it's quite as simple as that, you know, because Casey is a very low density suburb overall. You know, we've got some beautiful photos that Mark took looking out over the suburb, and it's all very, very low density generally speaking. So my questions are around the role really of the design review panel. Consultation with the design review panel was a mandatory requirement, and EPSDD must take into consideration the views expressed by the panel. So they commented on the original proposal, and they said that they could support 5 to 8 stories, and they asked for the proposal to be returned to them if it was amended, if it was changed. They asked for the proposal to be referred back to them for review. That didn't happen. And the DA was exhibited, and we got 160 submissions to that. So now the nod, I have looked at the nod, in the 45 minutes I had. It says a couple of things. It says the number of stories far exceeds the number of stories outlined in R45, which is the commercial.
Yeah, which has a 2-storey height limit.
Which
for
has a
group centres.
2-storey height limit, yes. And it says the proposed increase is not considered consistent with the desired character of the locality. And in relation to the plot ratio, it says the proposed increase in plot ratio is not considered consistent with the desired character of the locality. And the permitted plot ratio is 1:1, and the previous plot ratio was 5:1.
Yep.
So actually, what is the plot ratio?
Well, it's 4:1 now. 'cause
It's
we've taken
4:1
20%
now.
out.
Okay,
yeah.
so now it's 4:1. The permitted plot ratio is 1:1.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, why does the proponent not think that it would be helpful to the process generally of determining what is the right height for this development, to go back to the design panel and see whether they support the reconsideration DA or what comments they might have?
So that's the problem that we have with going back to the design review panel is if you ring them up today and try and book an assessment with them, you'll get offered a time in March of next year. That's the biggest challenge that we have.
6 months.
Yeah. So the developer, and no developer wants to have a proposal that is more or less ready to lodge as a DA and sit on it and wait for 6 months to get back through the design review panel. So that's the main driver for not going to them twice. And so that's why we went straight to DA rather than going around again. And then just in terms of, so I know that the rule compliant height control for a group centre is 2 stories, and the rule compliant plot ratio is 100% or 1:1. But that is, that's kind of, in my mind, that's nonsense in the current, compared to what is aspirational in all of our strategic planning documents and the expectation for a modern group centre, where even the planning authority is designing local centres that are multiple stories taller than that already, sort of thing. So and both of those rule compliant numbers specifically have a criteria associated with them that allows, it contemplates that people will go beyond what's rule compliant, and the criteria have measures against which you choose to be assessed against.
No one's expecting you to be 2 stories.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice to have seen what comments the design review panel might have made about the revised proposal. But actually, I was just wondering, I've been looking at the contours. Do you have a section that shows the interrelationship between the roof level of the units currently behind the shopping centre and adjacent to, compared to the roof level of the amended proposal? Is it at level? Is it higher? Is it lower?
I'm pretty sure it'll be higher, but I don't have that available to me. But I'm sure I could get one made.
Yeah, I think it would be a very worthwhile comparison to make. I think it would make it a lot easier for people to put it more into context with what's there now.
Yep.
Because I worked it out. It's about an 8-metre fall from the street behind down to Horse Park.
Yep.
Yeah, down the bottom. So just I would like to see how that compares there. It's just, can I ask a couple of other questions? Quick ones?
Yeah, quick ones
I think they're very quick. Yeah. What percentage of the 20% affordable housing obligation has already been met?
It's there's only, I think, I can't remember the exact number. It's like there's about 9, I think, more affordable dwellings that have to be delivered through
Just
this.
9?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a relatively small number.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll leave the rest. No, it's not a quick question.
We can chat more afterwards too if you want.
Just I want to quickly check the Facebook questions. You got those questions? Yeah.
So I don't know whether these are up to date, but there appears to be some sort of talk about the vacant slots, the vacant parking spaces that you were talking about, that was a bit subjective. Apparently there was some other analysis that said that there were a lot less than what you quoted.
Okay.
So
we included the drone photos of the parking with dates and times on them it's in the traffic report. So if people want to provide alternates, then that's okay. But
it wasn't really a question; it was more a statement.
Yeah.
And I'm just reading it. And the other one was about in regards to cycle paths and things like that they flood apparently, and there's certain aspects about that as well. So that's just in the comments and that sort of thing. So I just thought I'd include those because we always try and do that. If we're broadcasting it on Facebook, and we get questions that come in, we relay those questions even if they're statements.
Yeah, I think I know the spot where it probably goes underwater, and on a day when it's bucketing down with rain, that's the day you drive.
How did you get to Casey going under sort of Mirabeau Drive sort of area? How did you not finish across the road there, considering that
You can go
under there? So
Let's take that offline.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about it after. I'll show you the map. Yeah.
Just a couple of things before we close off your session. You talked about the entertainment, great entertainment facility in Casey. In fact, Gungahlin, all of district, we don't have entertainment. Next section is all about asking for one. So, so it'd be interesting for you to listen. Why we have all the MLAs tonight.
I think I was thinking more of sporting, but anyway,
So the entertainment, and then you talked about the transport. Another thing as well, there is a illusion or delusion in Canberra that Gungahlin has the best transport. Yes, we can go from city to Gungahlin town centre, but none of our public transport, have connectivity to any other districts. We've been rising for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So, so we don't have a great transport as yet. So these all kind of work in progress. And with the traffic model and all those things with the duplication, you hear me every time saying like we need those roads to be duplicated to cater for those upcoming schools and the aged care facilities and all those things. So I think when you have those kind of apartments coming there, I think it's going to be, that's why people are making more noise because it's already congested, and as the government or the respective department listened, we're not sure. But we do think that you would probably take some suggestions made tonight and made some necessary modifications as we progress on this one. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. Thanks.
All right. Just want to thank all the MLAs who are here, Michael, James, Leanne, Andrew. Thank you very much for coming down. We do appreciate it because I know and understand this is a sitting week for you guys. So thanks. I know it's a long night, and hopefully this topic will make us all awake. The entertainment, I think this is what we are going heading to. So we've been asking for cinemas since maybe 2012, and it's a long and winding saga. I do get phone calls every week at least about the Gungahlin cinemas. So, and there are so many sad phone calls, stories which I can't share online, but I'm happy to share those stories, offline. the entertainment. At the moment, I don't see any entertainment options available in Gungahlin, which is what we are here. And you know, at the moment, people are traveling to different districts to get those entertainment done. And what we are trying to do is like, we are also in progress of doing a petition to make sure that ACT government to facilitate the development of cinema in Gungahlin sooner. And I do know that you guys done some works as well in the Assembly. So the idea is to bring you all and share your vision for entertainment, specifically about the cinema. How do you see for the next 6 months what you're going to achieve or what you're trying to achieve in the next 6 months' time? So that's the plan. So Michael, probably I will start with you. Sure. That's okay. Thanks, Michael.
So speaking of this one, does that one do anything?
That one's for the room, that's for the online, so you can put it on.
Okay. There's just a lot of things going on. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. It's always a delight to come along to the Community Council. As a local member, one of the most frequent things raised with me when I stand on Hibberson doing a street stall is the cinema, which is surprising to many people, because for many people, going to the cinema is not something that they think about doing often. But for certain members of our community, going to the cinema is something that they want to do, and they want to do it often, they want to take their kids, they want it to be an option for their kids. So let me go through the long and sordid history of how we've got where we are now, because what was behind me doesn't have all the detail, which really paints the rich complexity of how silly all of this is. So before the 2012 ACT election campaign, there was a growing community sentiment that the growing district of Gungahlin needed a cinema. I fondly recall going around with then candidate Megan Fitzharris, collecting signatures on her petition. After the election, the Labor Party took their commitment to the community to release a block of land. They took that commitment and they put it into action. So in 2013, the government released a block of land in Gungahlin Town Centre, right next to us essentially, for the provision of a cinema. So they essentially sold a lease to someone, and simultaneously with that lease, they made them enter into a deed of agreement, which said that they had to build a cinema on that site. Now, there have been a range of delays involving disputes between cinema operators, but the most pressing and I think consequential things that I'm happy to update the community on, the owner had a development application approved for the site. So for all of the delays through court disputes, they had a development application approved. Then COVID hit. And I am sympathetic that the construction industry was in turmoil. The future of cinemas was up in the air throughout COVID. But they were required under that development application they had approved to commence construction by April this year, or else that development application would lapse. Now, throughout that process, relevant government authorities had been in contact with the developer saying, are you still committed to this? Are you actually going to start building? And the developer said yes. Kept saying yes, we're committed to this. And as we all know, sitting here today, by April 2023, they've not commenced construction. And the very upsetting development is that the developer is no longer corresponding with the government as of the last attempts, when I raised this in the Assembly. So the Gungahlin community is somewhat at an impasse. As a local member, I think local residents want to see this happen, and I think there is a role for government in trying to facilitate this. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe in the role of government, but I'm not necessarily sure the future of Gungahlin is like an ACT government branded cinema. I'm not sure that's necessarily what good government looks like, but there is a role for the ACT government to try and hold developers to account, to make people that make commitments to the government, to the community, accountable for those commitments. So we are in an impasse. How do we resolve this issue? As frustrating as it is to say this, the best path forward, and I'm not going to speak about how likely this is, but the best path forward is that the developer turns around tomorrow and says that actually, no, I am committed to this. I'm going to start construction as soon as I possibly can. Let's get this done. Now, if they don't do that, we have some really hard decisions to make. Do we potentially think about a cinema on a different site? If so, who builds it? Who's interested in running it? Are different business entities already in Gungahlin Town Centre interested in trying to facilitate something like this? And then theoretically, in the most extreme of circumstances, there's conversation theoretically that could be had about are these people upholding their lease conditions? Now, that would be, I think, a very fraught argument to make. But theoretically, at this point, I'm happy to explore all options because I know that Gungahlin residents are just so frustrated that there's this empty block of land that they thought was going to be a cinema about a decade ago, and they're still looking at patches of dirt.
Just a quick question for you on this one, Michael. Thank you. So you said about the the builders not corresponding to ACT government. So correct me if I'm wrong. As per my understanding, as per the Crown lease, they are required to complete this project by Feb 2024. Is that correct?
They need to commence construction
Yep.
by April 2023. So their development application has now lapsed. So that would have been part of that original development application, but they've failed at the first hurdle.
So they already breached what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'll just finish. Can I just finish it? And then, so if they already breached it, why can't the ACT government revoke the land back or take action?
It's a good question. So I'll make a couple of broad points. Here in the ACT, we don't have freehold land. You don't own land, you get a lease. Now, with that, theoretically, the government has a lot more power to make decisions about the land because it's still the government's land, someone's got a lease on it. As it stands right now, they're there paying their rates. They're paying their rates for that block of dirt. And now, theoretically, the government could try and mount a legal argument that they're in breach of their lease conditions. Now, I don't want to speculate on the likelihood of that success. I don't think it's a likely road to be pursued. I'm not sure it's the best way forward. But theoretically, that could be pursued. It would take years through the court, and I'm not particularly confident that it would be successful. We've seen all across the ACT instances where people have essentially purchased land and then sat on it and done nothing. Now, we can speculate as to the reasons why they've done that. I think everyone would have some pretty good guesses as to why people do that. And unfortunately, that is one of the problems that we face in our current market system, in that people who purchase property rights, that's their property, and the role of government in making them do things can be constrained sometimes.
It's interesting, Michael, because if it's a residential block and no one has used, the government would have taken it, and we've seen incident happen in Calvary Hospital as well, so what government can do and not do. So I think considering based on what you said, they already breached the agreement, I think probably the government could look into the other options so that it'll be better for Gungahlin.
I just want to be very specific with the wording, and I appreciate your interest in wanting to get the specifics. They have not commenced construction under their development application and have stopped responding to the relevant authorities. Now, that's not to say that they've breached their lease. They're different, and I understand for some people that isn't immediately clear, that their development application to build something is different to their lease, essentially their ownership of the property.
Okay, still they haven't completely breached? Is that what you're saying now?
So they haven't.
You're missing the point here. What he's trying to say is under a Crown lease,
Yeah.
you have certain property rights that are inferred. Under a DA, which is a separate application that is submitted to a separate body, then they have certain obligations. The certain obligations are contractual in nature with the government. The lease itself creates a property right that is the same as if you had a freehold land, but with certain restrictions that the government can apply. So the question is misconceived in what you're trying to promote. What he's saying is that they are not in compliance with the development application. Now that will come down to the terms of the development application. I'm assuming the relevant body will be saying that you've got a certain period of time to respond. If they don't, they can cancel the development application. That means they start afresh. I'm saying there will be a clause in there that will be, they've got a 2-year extension window. They can bring that later down the track, and then that will be for the body to decide. So the question is very misconceived as to what you're trying to get them to answer, and you can't answer it.
I'm just trying to ask a question based on what you were saying. Yeah, but thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
Nathan also raises, I think, a really interesting point. And I'm genuinely curious on what community sentiment would be. If the developer asks for an extension, does the Gungahlin community have kind of faith in this developer to kind of see this project through? I speak to some people that have really little faith that this developer is genuine about trying to build a cinema. I speak to some people that do. But it's going to be, I think, a consequential decision of government when they try and potentially, theoretically, seek an extension, which is something they have the ability to ask for, whether or not that's something government should approve.
It's just something I wanted to address, which is that the cinema, from my personal sort of feeling, is that it kind of leads into that Gungahlin East kind of precinct. And one of the things that I think the cinema would add a lot of value to is an entertainment precinct and an extension of the town centre out into that area. And given what I've seen in the community panel and the things that they've put forward, I think it's an exciting development in Gungahlin East from what I've seen that maybe a lot of people are not aware of. And so I see that there really is business potential in order to have a cinema sort of there to sort of supplement what prospects there are for that in the future. But I think I think it's the minister's perspective that they're not in breach of their Crown lease conditions. Is that the correct terminology? I'm not.
Yes. As long as you're paying your rates,
yeah.
you're unless you're doing some strange, nefarious things,
Yeah.
As long as you're paying your rates.
And there isn't much in which the planning department can sort of do because they're not in breach of those Crown lease sort of conditions for another couple of years, and that there could be extensions, as you mentioned, that are put on that. But I guess the question I want to ask is, has there been any update in regards to communication between yourselves and the developer? Or, I mean, this has obviously been in the Legislative Assembly and it's been spoken about. So we live in hope in Gungahlin that we can find a amicable sort of arrangement and that we can actually get a cinema there. So has there been any developments?
I've heard no updates in the past few weeks. And I've raised this in the Assembly twice now. It is a source of frustration for me. I am one of those people that does like going to the cinema. So when I started and I said that there are some parts of the community that really actually want to see cinema, I include myself in that. As a representative, but also just as an individual. Gungahlin Town Centre should be a vibrant place on a Friday and Saturday night. I think a cinema is an important anchor tenant to facilitate more restaurants. I don't want to go so far as to say nightlife in the most extreme sense, but maybe more bars, places where people can come together, socialise. And Gungahlin Town Centre is starting to have some of those options kind of present themselves. Increasingly, there are more of those hospitality options, but I think a cinema would really turbocharge that. So that's why it's just so vital that we get a cinema now and not just on the never.
As part of an entertainment precinct, I think that would be great.
100%.
Look, just to get specific, because I remember when we were looking at purchasing land to build a house, for example, so that would be a lease, yep. And if we didn't commence building by a certain date, you know, there were rates and things involved, I guess, but there were penalties as well. So penalties might have been a bit weak at the time, I'm not sure what they are now. So for this particular lease, they're paying rates. Is there an additional penalty or a fine they're paying for the non-compliance building? So it comes under the lease, not the DA, I understand. So, and so the additional question is, what does it take for them to be in breach of the lease?
So to answer your question broadly, yes, there are increasing penalties, extra money you have to pay. Now, please do not make me try and quote what those numbers are, because I have not the foggiest chance of getting them right.
Are they material? 50 grand a year, it's nothing.
And I think that is an astute point, Mr. Elford. I think a fair critique would be that for
rates.
Not material is the answer.
I think it's a fair critique, and I'll say this openly. I think there are many examples around the ACT of people who own particularly important locations, sites, who are prepared to cop that because...
Does that not send a piece of feedback to you? That penalty is not worth the label?
Yeah,
you can't use the phrase, you know, we're trying to do the right thing as government when you've got a leasehold system that enables you to take action and you don't.
Just to be specific on the question,
Take action on what? Breach of your lease, why is the penalty not material?
Well, like I said, I agree with you. And I think the evidence is very clear that there are people right now that are making a seemingly sound economic decision to buy a block and sit on it, and they're happy to pay that extra money. Now, 100%, the proof is in the pudding, that is happening, and I'm telling you that I not only share that frustration, but would like to see something done about it. Unfortunately, as much as I wish I could wave a magic wand and make all the decisions for the ACT government, I don't have that power, but rest assured, I share that concern, and it is something that I would like to see changed as well.
So can I just put it, say a question, maybe not to you, but the question to the relevant minister and the government, that they're actually there at the behest to serve the public of Canberra, right? They're not elites sitting on a pedestal. So their job is to do what is in the best interest of the community, not to sit there and collect rates, not to sit there and just back up the coffers of the government, but to serve the community. And I'm quite happy to directly face the minister that's required. This is on public record. You know, let's see him front up and let's see the government front up and not just sit back and not give a damn.
Is there a question? Comment.
It's a comment.
No, it was a question. When is the relevant government authority going to do something about it and not sit back and just reap in the rates?
Okay, so part of the tension of this situation is that someone is validly holding a lease for that block of land. They simultaneously have entered into an agreement to build a cinema on it. Yep. Now, they're paying their rates to own the block of land. They're yet to follow through with the obligation to build a cinema on it. Now, I'm not sure what particular side of this equation you're seeking further action on.
So, okay, another question. Can this situation, I guess the lease is what, a 99-year lease? Is that what it's been? Right.
Essentially.
So, are there no provisions in any of this arrangement that's been put in place and that maybe no one could have foreseen? So maybe that's just a failure in whoever approved it. that we have to wait for 99 years for that lease to expire and then something can be done about it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I understand where this line of thinking goes.
Ineffectual government, that's basically it. Yeah.
Just
It's not an accurate representation at all. It's not ineffectual government. You're competing against
policy.
Governments. No. The basis that you're making an assessment and making a judgment here is on the basis that the government has an overarching power to take away property rights. That's fundamentally incorrect in any legal principle, and that's why we have such things as relief against forfeiture and other things like just compensation. And you've got, it's literally, he's trying to say to you, you've got a developer who's paid valuable consideration to purchase a block of land. That developer is paying an ongoing rent at an increased rate, which is a penalty rate because they have failed to adhere to development covenants. And so you're now saying that the government needs to be more onerous and needs to be more heavy-handed against developers who do this thing, which we don't know the reason why the developer hasn't developed that land. So there are many bases and many elements there that you haven't actually considered. And if you were to give the government that power, you would then say to a developer ultimately, and I work with a lot of developers, I can say this, developers will not fucking invest. They will not buy the land, they will not develop
Maybe
the
not,
land.
that's not such a bad thing for bloody developers.
Maybe
Maybe
we
we
said that, but then
I think, we will maintain the language. Can you?
I apologise for the swear, but the premise again and the question is ill-conceived. It's not something that's, and even if you get the relevant minister here, he's going to say we're constrained. There are laws in place that actually protect the developer who has purchased this land. And unless you go to the High Court and say that those laws don't exist, which good luck to you, it's not going to change.
So is there no occurrence where the government has decided that maybe there's a farm or maybe there's some property and that they need to acquire that for another purpose or a higher reason, that they haven't assumed that land back from the lease of that?
It's unusual. It's called a hospital.
Thank you, Mr. Elford.
The point, Nathan, is it?
Yeah.
You're suggesting that people are suggesting that the land be taken back. For what it's worth, and I'm not a lawyer, I appreciate that's non-trivial. What I'm saying is the current regime where the proponent has purchased the land, signed a lease agreement which commits them to deliver a cinema, the penalties of them not delivering against that lease are so modest, they just wear the fiscal price. And the whole purpose of putting the clause there in the first place was to deliver a public amenity for the sale of the site. So the site has subsequently been divided into 3 blocks, one of which has been built, completed, and is built revenue, and the second is being sold right now for a set of units. The last quarter of that site is left. So the notion that the owner of that site is somehow dreadfully out of pocket is fanciful, right? But this is not unique. As you have said, Michael, there are plenty of examples all over Canberra where a lease has been sat on and the lease penalties for not meeting the obligations that are so microscopic as no one does anything. They just sit on it. And the losers in this are the people seeking a decent public amenity, which come up several times today around, it's great to densify, but where's the public amenity? That's not going to come from the development community.
That's right.
That has to come from government.
That's right.
So the government really needs to think seriously about trying to find a way to make these deeds worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There are models that I think are not necessarily directly applicable, but show that there are solutions to problems like this. We've seen the Kingston Arts Precinct suffer a range of setbacks, and the Suburban Land Agency, thank you for being here, have found a role in the delivery of that important cultural and entertainment precinct. So government can build things, however, it's not necessarily straightforward when we've got a site in the town centre that's been designated, there's a deed of agreement. So even if I sit here today and say, why don't we just get the ACT government to go build one, that's also a fraught path forward. This is a wicked situation that we're in, and it is so frustrating. I wish we weren't here, but alas, we are.
Thanks, Michael, for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming down and taking questions. Andrew, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Oh, oops, better put that on. Just a point of clarity, and then to follow it up. The wording is actually within the lease which was granted in 28 February 2022 was a building covenant clause, which said it must be developed completed within 24 months from that date, so 28 February 2024. And I would very much agree with what Peter was saying in terms of if a developer fails to meet the clauses within those Crown leases, there is insufficient incentive built into the system to actually ensure that the community achieves the benefit from a piece of land which is currently sitting vacant, but which could be providing commercial opportunities for the community, employment opportunities, a place to congregate, come together, be with friends, family, and access either might be retail, hospitality, entertainment, all of those functions. So I wouldn't be, and I'm not advocating for repossessing the land. What I am saying is we need to look at the economic settings that are built in around those, the use of land, to ensure the community actually achieves the benefit. And as Michael mentioned, there are plenty of examples across the ACT where we all know where land has been sitting vacant for extended periods of time and the community has not been able to benefit. Now, sometimes that's for very legitimate purposes, like you get a pandemic hit, you might get involved in all sorts of legal proceedings, and so there needs to be an element of discretion for the government to say, yes, we understand and appreciate the challenges you might have hit, but there also needs the ability to set the incentives to actually say, the community sold you this land on the understanding that there will be a particular community benefit arising from the development on this land. If that's not been achieved, the incentives obviously need to be in place to ensure that it actually occurs. And so that's what I would be calling for. What I would say is, whilst I'd love to see a cinema, and I see a lot of the community who come to me and ask to see a cinema, I'm not necessarily a cinema or bust position. I'm very happy to contemplate other uses which will provide those commercial opportunities, employment opportunities, entertainment and other functions as well. If we can achieve that without a cinema, because the cinema industry is facing a lot of turmoil at the moment, there's a lot of streaming services, COVID definitely knocked the numbers around. If I can see that sort of outcome achieved for Gungahlin, I'd support that too. I want to see this land utilised to the highest value for the benefit of the Gungahlin community, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. So I suppose I'll flick it out there in terms of, are there any questions on that?
I think that you're right there, and there's a couple of different things. There's about, somebody purchasing land for a cinema specifically, and that's a hot topic within Gungahlin. But we saw with Gungahlin East, and we also saw it with what used to be the business park, essentially about something that's sort of purchased for a particular purpose, and then all of a sudden things change, or there's maybe not enough sort of impetus in order to build certain aspects of it. And I think the community just becomes disillusioned and disappointed, because in a sense we lose a lot of employment sort of opportunities and things like that. And I guess what you're sort of alluding to is that maybe that there's more things holistically about planning that maybe need to be tightened up in regards to when people are building certain things, about what the expectations are from the community, and also with developers to sort of have that more tightly matched together. And so I think that would probably be helpful in the future if that was examined in some way, about when people purchase something, because we've seen a lot of that in Gungahlin, and we saw a lot of it even when we were at the community panel where we talked about the fact that there were developers that were there that were talking about, I want to go from commercial to residential because of the precedent that was set by other developments in the area and these types of things. So, we would like to see that tightened up a lot, particularly in regards to that gateway to Gungahlin East. That Gungahlin East has restrictions that are in there that really sort of say, if you're going to build X, or don't buy the land, essentially.
Yeah, and I suppose things change, and we understand that. What do we want to see it change into is still something we need to really discuss. I wouldn't want to see 20-storey residential with no employment, no space available for the community to access retail, hospitality, other commercial opportunities. So what I'm saying is, I'm not just saying the cinema is the only model that I'd like to see on that particular block. I'd love to see a cinema, but if a cinema is not achievable, I'm open to other ideas, as long as those community benefits are still achieved. That's the important thing that I really want to stress.
I think I just want to, I appreciate you, Andrew, but, there's no compromise of not having a cinema in Gungahlin. Let's make it clear, we need cinemas, and that's what promised. So we will stick to that at all costs and make sure, other developments, of course, we need it because some of the employment blocks already been taken away from us, as you know. So we just want to stick to, what it was promised, what it was destinated for, and of course other developments would be always welcome in terms of, if it's going to be a commercial element into it. So the other thing as well, the cinemas would also bring employment opportunity, which we lack in Gungahlin at the moment. So, all right. Thank you very much for coming down.
No problem.
We've got 2 more to go, James, and you want to come as a duo? Yeah.
James is first. He's aged before beauty.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you, Henley, for the opportunity to come along and speak to you here tonight. Just want to acknowledge Peter too, former president here, and let's say former mayor of Gungahlin as well. He's had a lot of involvement in this area for quite some time. Look, the cinema, as we all know, has been a bit of a debacle now for a little over 10, 11 years. Mr. Pedersen did go through the history of this debacle, and I don't think we really need to go through that again. But what we can do is make a commitment that we'll certainly be pushing the government to ensure that this cinema is developed and this cinema is built, because it's what the government, it's what the community have wanted for quite some time. Now, Mr. Pedersen did bring forward a motion last week about this cinema. And I just want to quote what Mr. Gentleman said in that motion in his speech. And he said that the developer also currently has the opportunity to extend the building covenants in the Crown lease. Mr. Gentleman also went on to say that there is limited opportunities for the government to intervene at this stage of the development, given that there is currently no breach by the developer. This is just a fact of the matter, right? But I think what the government should be doing is doing everything it possibly can to work with the developer to try and get this development happening. And I think that's in the best interest of the community, in the best interest of the government, to ensure that this important facility is built for this area. Now, I'm not sure whether the block that was purchased was the block where the DHA building is currently built. I think, was that where the cinema was originally going to be built? I think it was, and the developer decided, because they had both blocks, I think.
They had 3 blocks.
3 blocks. Was it one of the... Yeah. Yeah, subdivided. Right. It's something that we need to see, and it would be good to see further development at this end of town. We're seeing level up go up at the other end of town. There's a lot of business there, a lot of traffic that goes into that area. We need to bring people back down to this area of town. But to be honest, I don't want to see more bars, cafes and nail salons. I think we've got enough of that in the Gungahlin Town Centre. I want to see a bit more business diversity here. a few more business opportunities here, as well as employment opportunities. And I think what we need to do, and I think a Canberra Liberals government would work with the community, work with community councils, work with developers, work with our government departments, bring them all together to have a conversation, right? To really develop what do we want for this area and how do we do it? And I think if the community understood the perspective from developers on what they propose and what they bring forward based on the business case and economic environment, but then if they understood really what the community really wanted for their area, and then if the government was compassionate enough and had a heart, maybe they might be able to work with both the developers, the community, and bring what this community really wants for the Gungahlin Town Centre.
Microphone.
Yeah, microphone. Oh, we've just got one.
Thank you. Look, I agree. As James says, we're all about making sure we've got all of the facilities. I don't necessarily agree that it's cinema or bust. Why can't we have it all here? And I often wonder, and I say this in the chamber often, if possibly there was a minister in the government here in Yarrabee, would things be a little bit different? I'm unsure. Would there be someone here every day that has the power to sort of push more? And I appreciate Mr. Pedersen. Michael has brought 2 of these motions now, and it's. I was new to politics when I was elected in 2020, right? So it sort of shocked me that a government backbencher had to bring this to the attention of their own government. And good on him, he has, and we support that. But I do wonder if we had a minister here that didn't have cinemas in their area, would we be without them still? I don't know. That's just a question I have. The only other thing I'll say is that when this was promised in 2012, my youngest was 10. She's now 21 and ready to leave the country and go and live her life. My eldest son is 26, married, and I suppose in a couple of years going to have kids. I wonder how long we have to wait for this in my family's growth period and generation or, cycle. I really want this, and I think it's time to get that happening. That's all I have to say. Questions? Any questions? Yes?
Thanks very much for jumping up, providing another sort of political perspective. I guess my question is, and based on some of the discussion here, developers, etc., is why should the community, and I'll say the voters and the taxpayers and the families, because that's what the cinema is about, it's more about families than getting your nails done or going to the bar. I don't see too many families hanging about the bar sinking a few points. So that's what the cinema does, is bring that, and as well as entertainment. Why should the community have any confidence in what we're told anymore? Because it used to be like, we'll commit to do this for you. We'll commit still in the way Canberra manages land. And it's pretty obvious it's to the advantages of certain sections. Why should the voting public have confidence in what any one of you says?
What's your name, sir?
Cameron.
Cameron, nice to meet you. And good question, because that's the reason I got into politics. I was tired of things being promised that were never, they never came about. And so I don't know a lot about how the policy works, but I know that clearly in this instance it's not working. And given the opportunity, as you've heard James and I, we're working with a government that has been in power by over 20 years. And so I would say, why are they unable to make this come to fruition since we all voted for them? Or we didn't vote for them, but the community has. Does that make sense? I don't know. We can't do anything from an opposition perspective other than say, if we had a shot, we would certainly try and make this happen. And James might know a bit more about policy in the way we can make that happen.
I'll put it here so I don't have to hold it. This goes back to what I said earlier, that we need to bring, like I said, the developers, the community, the government departments together, right? So we fully understand the development process. So we fully understand what is economically viable to build on our land, to know what the community wants to be built on that land. At the moment, land in Canberra is expensive. It's a lot of money. And for a developer to come along and buy a parcel of land, they've got to ensure that they make a return on that parcel of land that they build. And to get lending, they've got to ensure that they've got up to 40% or more income generated off it to be able to afford to build whatever they build on that parcel of land. In terms of what is built on that land, I think it comes down to the planning laws and the territory plan. If there is a development that's being built and it doesn't meet community expectations, it means there's a problem with the planning laws. It means there's a problem with the territory plan. Just like earlier, we heard about the development in Casey. There's a lot of residents that aren't happy with that development. That suggests that maybe the territory plan and the planning laws don't meet community expectation. So we need to review it. The planning laws here in the ACT are one of the biggest in this country. I think the planning laws need to be tipped upside down, simplified, and made a lot easier to meet community expectation, to be honest. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in this space, and we're in opposition. We're aiming to get into government next year, and my colleague, Mr. Kane, is doing a lot of work in this space. He wants to do a lot with the planning laws to ensure that it does meet community expectation.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what you mentioned about the fact that in those areas there's more that could be sort of looked at rather than just the bars and the clubs and things like that. And I think I can sort of see where you're coming at with is the Gungahlin East, and I keep bringing this up because essentially the cinema is essentially the gateway to that. And one of the things that we noticed about that precinct that the Gungahlin Community Council was sort of working with the Suburban Land Agency and the various other departments, ES, PDD and all that sort of stuff, was about some of the developers that actually had already purchased blocks of land that were there. We would ask them questions like, why are you not sort of a big box retailer or something like that? And they said, well, we can't do that because we're restricted to 500 square metres. And so that was firmly in the rules, essentially, when they purchased that they could only put a small sort of block in there. And that was more amenable to coffee shops and things like that. And so one of the aspects that I could see early on is that this is sort of classified as the retail core, this side, and that side was the office core. And so in the office core there were sort of aspects about that where the blocks were sort of measured in a certain way to be more amenable to office sort of space. And so one of the problems that I had looking at this was essentially it was saying if we couldn't get a federal government department here, we immediately need to go to residential. And so my problem with that is what I hear all the time from the surveys, and you hear it on the street all the time. People want a JB Hi-Fi. People want an expansion of retail. And I'm like, why is the expansion of retail completely out of the question into the new Gungahlin East precincts? And people want houses to live in. Well, that's fine. But we also see a lot of problems associated, and the government's even admitted this and talked about this a lot, about the mixed use is not really mixed use. It's sort of ground floor business, and we heard about that. I was even mentioning that with the Casey. Why not an extra floor of retail? Why is everybody not going towards that, considering it's so successful in that area? So one of the things, how would you feel about an expansion of retail into sort of Gungahlin East in those areas, and bigger sort of spaces and block sizes associated with that, to allow the sort of developments that you're talking about that might be a bigger sort of development?
Either way, but yeah, we talk to the same people. Obviously, when I'm at mobile offices, that's what they say. I think, and for some reason, JB Hi-Fi is the winner here, and so why don't we have that ability out here in Gungahlin? It's got to be something that must be considered, because we can't just be filled with homes. We talk about it often, where we all leave every single day, not so much anymore, but and come back and sleep here. There's got to be more for Gungahlin than that, and that's I think that's to your point. We definitely need bigger commercial spots. You anything more?
Level 1 or level up. Level up. Half the businesses in there were just relocated. Yeah. My worry is what's going to move into these other empty shop fronts here. What's going into the old Aldi store? Maybe we could see a JB Hi-Fi move into there. That would be ideal. I'd certainly support that. But I think we need to go back to the drawing board for the Gungahlin Town Centre, really, and think about, well, what is the future of this town centre? What does it look like? What land do we have available? What is permitted on that land? Can we make a variation to it? To try and attract big box retail, to try and attract more employment opportunities. We have, how many universities do we have here? And how many vocational education and training institutions do we have here? We have a lot. Imagine if we decided to put out a hub like Watso on Northbourne Avenue and use that as a centre for the universities and students and other businesses to come here and operate from. But there seriously needs to be a proper relook. And we've got to include the other end of the town centre, this end, interlink it all. Whatever other land comes up available for further developments, we've got to ensure that there's pathways to connect that parcel of land with Hibbenson Street. And come up with a proper plan. I think that's what people of Yarrabee deserve. I think that's what they deserve. I think we need a fresh look at it. Be bold.
Thanks, James. I'll try and keep it short because I know everybody's really hungry. I know I am.
Are we all having dinner, are we? Hopefully
Not
the
on
bistro's
me.
open.
I left my wallet at home.
That's right, Nathan's got it covered.
The leasehold system, I have in the past been extremely passionate about the leasehold system. It's the perfect planning tool. At least it was. It was the perfect planning tool. But sometime between 2007 and 2016, it was diluted like just a weak cup of tea, to be honest. Legislation was passed to remove commence covenants from all leases, and the EOT charges were wound right back, as other people have said, to be quite pointless, nothing more than a little slap on the wrist, really. So you talked about reviewing the planning system, the territory plan and everything, but the leasehold system is also part of the planning system, and it could be a very excellent tool. And as we've heard, it's just not working. So if a Liberal government was elected, would a Liberal government commit to going back to the future with the leasehold system?
Back to the future in terms of freehold, that you own the parcel of land, or back in terms of conducting a comprehensive review of the leasehold system, looking at how it used to work and how it used to work well, and going back to...
Amusingly, specifically excluded from the reform of the planning system.
Yeah, exactly.
Root and branch, yeah. I know last term we did speak a bit about this with my colleagues because there has been a lot of concerns raised about the leasehold and how it works here in the ACT. But this term we have Mr. Kane, who's our planning minister. Shadow. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. But to be honest, I'll probably have to seek some advice from Mr. Kane and see what his view or position is on this, and if he has investigated this or compared it with anything else to provide a response to that.
I do think it's worth looking at if something was working and it's not now. I imagine that would be something that, of course, we would have to look into. But like James, that's certainly something we would have to work out what our policy position is on the way to go. I mean, I'm Shadow Business Minister, so I'm like, yes to business. So, but I can't do that in isolation, and it's important to make sure that we do get it right, because it's wrong. It's not working. So we have to make sure we get it right.
It's certainly, this whole leasehold situation is new to me. I grew up in country Victoria, and you want a block of land, you go to the real estate and you buy a block of land. You can't do that here. You've got to go on a ballot, and you're one of 4,000 to 7,000 people trying to buy one block of land, and there's only 150 available. It's something that needs to be addressed and looked at in this space.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
So thank you, Emily.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Lynn. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming down. Special thanks to our speakers. I know it's a long night, and always encouraged to have a good discussion, but sometimes the good discussion sounds like an argument. So if anyone is kind of offended with those arguments or discussions, you know, I think we need to learn from the next meeting. So, you know, be respectful and with your questions and stuff. But thank you, everyone. Thanks especially for our speakers. And thanks for joining us tonight. And we'll see you on our next public meeting, and we'll keep you updated on how things are going. Thank you, and God bless. Have a good night.